Hi, my name is Isaac Lee, and I am doing my presentation on Immanuel Kant. I just like to apologize in advance that my voice kind of sounds dead right now. There is great reason to that, but that's a different story. Immanuel Kant was born in 1724, born in Königsberg, which later became known as East Prussia, and later changed to what it is now called Kaliningrad. His parents were really poor, and they were pietists. Pietists rejected the idea of imposing a church or a priest between the individual and God. They preferred to rely on immediate personal appeal to God, and they lived very strict lives. When Kant was 8 years old, he went to a local school founded by a pietist preacher. This school was extremely strict. They started at a dreadful 5:30 in the morning. They prayed at every class section, and they were taught about pietism. And the reason why he hated this school was not because they started at 5:30 in the morning or because of their awesome, fun topics, but he hated it because of its huge emphasis on God's wrath. And he didn't like the fact that they emphasized too strong on you're going to go to hell if you don't follow God's instructions carefully. But even though he resented it, Kant still respected this view on life. And he says, those in whom it was sincere were worthy of honor. They possess the highest thing that man can have, the quiet, the content, the inner peace, which no suffering can disturb. When Kant was 16, he went to the University of Königsberg, and he studied there for 6 years. He refused an offer to become a Lutheran minister and just decided to continue his studies. He supported himself for 9 years by tutoring students, and eventually in 1755, Kant received a degree that is equivalent to a doctoral degree today. Later, he became a private docent, which is a private teacher whose salary is paid directly by the students. And Kant started becoming more popular and having more students, so in 1770 he was hired by the university and he became a professor of logic and metaphysics. Immanuel Kant was kind of like a hermit. The furthest he went away from his birthplace was around 60 miles. He never really traveled too far. He was single and he never married. He probably died a lonely death. But he lived a really strict routine life, probably because of his childhood. People said he went on his walk 8 times a day at the same times, and it did not matter what the weather condition was. If it was raining or snowing, he would just have his servant carry an umbrella for him. And he was also a writer of many difficult books. For example, The Critique of Pure Reason. Many philosophers say this is one of the most difficult books to read, and he sent his books out to different professors in metaphysics, and they would just send it back saying, if I read the whole thing, I'll turn insane. During Kant's life, there's a lot of problems with the philosophies out at the time, and this is because Hume was considered to be one of the most troublesome philosophers of all time, and he had many disturbing conclusions, and Hume never really proved anything that he said, which created a lot of problems. And the people that followed up after him were more mathematical and geometric. So they slowly derived away from a lot of philosophies, and they would always try to go back to it, but they never could because people didn't know about them. And the two big philosophical schools at the time denied the existence of cause and effect, the external world, and rendered reasons. So science started dominating. Science was saying the universe was mechanical in a way, and that there were universal, unchanging laws of nature. And Kant said that if this was to be true, there would be no need for God, and that there would also be no free will because the world would never offer any other choices and it'd just be the same laws of nature. So in response to this, Kant he formed an underlying structure, which is the formal component of knowing, and this is why he became known as a formalist. And the Kantian formalism is a theory that he states neither reason by itself nor sensation by itself can give us knowledge of the external world. Knowledge is the result of the interaction between the mind and sensation. Knowledge and experience are shaped, structured, or formed by special regulative ideas called categories. And this can also be known as the Kantian idealism or the transcendental idealism. And Kant also believed that Hume's error was that he did not understand the scientific method. Hume did not fully understand that the method is both empirical and rational, and that the method requires both a subject, a knowing mind, and an object, that which is known. And so Kant had to go back to the copy theory, and that basically says that if we believe it and see it, then it has to exist. And Kant realized that this could not work because we can never experience all bodies at different times. And Kant said that the scientific thinking involves activity of question and hypotheses, and it requires controlled experiment conditions, which is the knower, the subject, and the known, the object. And because of that, Kant says the scientific method is more reliable than Hume's philosophy. Kant then later started questioning metaphysics, different than science, and saying knowledge is based off reason, and independent reasoning, that is to knowledge, is not derived from the senses. So he brought up the critical philosophies, which is Kant's term for his effort to assess the nature and limits of pure reason, unadulterated by experience, in order to identify the actual relationships of mind to knowledge. And that knowledge is formed by two things, which is the phenomenal reality and nominal reality. The phenomenal reality is the world as we experience it, and nominal reality is independent of our perceptions of the objective reality. And basically it's saying that this is human reality and pure reality. Basically, we can never experience the nomina, the pure reality, and that raises the question of then why do we care about it and why do we say it exists? And the reason is because the idea of nomina allows for two things. One is to say that there's limits to human understandings, and two is this distinction is needed to establish a foundation for moral philosophy capable of preserving our moral autonomy for human philosophy and science. So Kant argued that since we can't directly experience it, there's a special class of transcendental idea, and this basically bridges the gap between the phenomenal and nominal worlds. And it unifies or makes possible to have an experience in the first place. And according to Kant, there's three transcendental ideas, and they are self, cosmos, and God. And according to Kant, pure reason synthesizes all our psychological activities into unity by positing idea of self, and the cosmos lend unity to experience by synthesizing all events into a single totality or cosmos. We can't really prove that this one actually exists, and it still remains as a mere idea. And God cannot be verified by appeal or existence, since it forms one of the organizing structures of categories of reasons. And there's no way to empirically prove the existence of these ideas, but they're ideas that help regulate human understanding, and it also refers to universal ideas. Kant comes up with two different reasons. One is a theoretical reason, and this explains that their interaction or a function of reason confined to the empirical phenomenal world. And this is basically saying that the interaction with the world of experience produces laws of behavior that force reasons to view everything mechanically, and that we are governed by cause and effect. And practical reason is moral functions of reason that produces religious feelings and intuitions based on knowledge of moral conduct. This is the one that helps us go beyond the phenomenal world and get to the moral dimension. And this helps us deal with moral freedom because of free will. Kant says no matter how many natural causes and sensations might drive a person, they cannot produce being under obligation. They cannot account for moral duty. And we do not act on impulses and desires alone, but we make a conscious choice. Kant believes goodness depends not on our behavior, but on our will, on what we intend to do if circumstances do not prevent it. Kant insisted that morality was entirely a matter of reason and goodwill, not, as some believe, a matter of consequences or actions. And in Kantian terminology, inclinations are actions based on impulse or desires. He believes that inclinations were unreliable and inconstant, and inclinations are not products of practical reason. And he gives a great example of how we can clearly see this from dogs, cats, and infants have a strong inclinations to eat this but not that, now but not later, and so on. And in Kant's sense of the term, they do not have a will, and they cannot act from a will. So now Kant goes back to the sense of moral duty, and so Kant says that duty is a necessity of acting from respect for the moral law. And he goes on to explain that duty does not serve our desires and preferences, but rather overpowers them. For moral duty, Kant argued that there are times when you have to change, and that is called hypothetical imperatives. And it's a proposition that tells us what to do under specific variable conditions. For example, if you needed to go out but it was raining and you postpone it, you're only postponing the picnic because of the rain, so there's a conditional relationship. And categorical imperative is a command that is universally binding on all rational creatures, the ultimate foundation of all moral law. He almost describes it as a principle of dignity, and he says that we should act in such a way that you always treat humanity, whether in your own person or in the person of another, never simply as a means, but always at the same time as an end. And this basically is a lot of Kant's philosophy. I had trouble understanding some of it, so I apologize if this presentation is not too great. Thank you.